Hi, I'm Eric, retired, grandfather, forgotten. My daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I won't feed you, Dad." Then handed me a warehouse job application like it was an act of mercy. They thought they broke me, that I'd quietly disappear into the background, sweeping floors and saying thank you for cold leftovers. But what they never knew was that I still had the keys to a villa they'd never seen, a life they erased, but not fully. They moved me out of my own home, told my grandson I was too tired to understand, smiled while selling off my name piece by piece. But now they're about to learn. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And the old man they buried alive, he's not done yet. What would you do if the people closest to you wrote your ending before your story was even finished? I woke up before the sun, same as always. Old habits don't retire just because you do. I made my bed with military corners, brewed coffee just strong enough to kick back at you, and sat at the small table in the garage that now served as my room. Funny how life shrinks. Once I had a whole house. Now I had a converted garage with a curtain instead of a door and no key to the front entrance. The walls were thin. I could hear the morning rush, Lydia on a video call, the kids dragging their feet, and my son Daniel silent as usual. No one called out to say good morning. Not that I expected them to. Around here, I was more fixture than father. They let me do the yard work, take out the trash, fix the leak in the bathroom, but none of it earned me a seat at the table. I folded my napkin the way I always did, crisp, perfect square, and waited for the only family I had left to remember I was still breathing. "Dinner's ready," Lydia's voice sliced through the air later that evening. I stepped toward the dining room, hopeful, foolish maybe, but still, hope is a stubborn thing. As I reached the table, Lydia blocked my path with a smirk that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, there's no plate for you." I stopped. The room froze with me. The kids looked down at their laps. Daniel stared at his phone. "I figured," she went on, "if you're that hungry, you can get a job. Here." She tossed a flyer onto the kitchen counter like it was garbage. "There's an opening at the grocery store. Stocking shelves. Easy stuff for someone with so much free time." I looked at her, then at Daniel. He didn't look up. A man doesn't beg for food in his own house. So I smiled, not because I found it funny, but because dignity is the only coat you keep when the storm hits. "You always were resourceful, Lydia," I said calmly. "Thanks for thinking of me." My stomach growled. I ignored it. Back in the garage, the air was colder than before. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the cracked photo on my nightstand. My late wife, my son, when he was still a boy with fire in his eyes. Now he barely made eye contact. Where did I go wrong? I raised a man who can watch his father get humiliated over dinner and still reach for the mashed potatoes. I used to believe silence was peace. Now I know silence can scream louder than any argument. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk and reached beneath a stack of old receipts and folded socks. The small metal box clicked open easily. Inside it lay a single polished key. Not to this house, but to a place that still remembered who I was. A villa, miles away. Bought under my wife's name before she passed, back when I still believed we'd grow old in peace. I never told anyone. Not Daniel, not Lydia, especially not Lydia. I took out my laptop and opened the security app. The feed loaded slowly, but there it was, my villa, clean, untouched, waiting. "One day," I whispered, "they'll understand the weight of what they threw away." I remembered when Lydia first moved in. Her perfume filled every room, her voice louder than the TV, her demands subtle but firm. I gave up the master bedroom without a fight. Daniel said, "Just for a while, Dad, until we save up." Years passed. The master stayed theirs. The silence, mine. Once I caught Lydia on the phone with a friend. She didn't know I was home. Yeah, he just hangs around like some old piece of furniture, doesn't even knock. Furniture. I didn't say anything then. I didn't say anything tonight. But I remember. I sipped warm water instead of dinner and opened my journal. The words came slow, steady. They think silence means surrender. It doesn't. It means I'm listening. The moon hung full above the garage window, a steady light in the dark. Timing is everything, I murmured. And mine is coming. I woke up hungry. Not just in the belly, in the chest, too. That kind of hunger settles behind your ribs, where disappointment turns into something more permanent. I boiled water, poured myself a cup of tea, black, no sugar, and stood alone in the garage, the steam fogging up my glasses. The house was already alive above me, the dull thud of feet, the bathroom fan humming, the muffled laughter of kids who used to run into my arms after school. Not anymore. On the fridge, I found a yellow sticky note. Be at 9th Main by 10 a.m. Dress decently. Ray. No hello, no explanation, just an order. Like I was a dog that forgot its place. I didn't ask questions. Old men who ask too much get treated like children, or worse, like burdens. I buttoned up a clean shirt, polished my shoes. Not for Ray, for me. You don't throw away discipline just because no one's watching. The sun was climbing fast when I got to the corner of 9th and Main. A blocky gray building sat there, squat and unwelcoming. Discount furniture warehouse, the kind of place where couches went to die and cheap plywood pretended to be oak. Inside, a bored-looking manager looked up from his clipboard. Oh, right, he said, squinting. Ray's father-in-law. You're here to help unload. I blinked. Unload? He didn't wait for a reply, just pointed toward the back. Trucks just came in. Gloves are in the bin. Outside, the sun was merciless. The work, worse. Big boxes, awkward angles, splinters digging into palms. Men half my age moved with practiced rhythm. Most of them spoke Spanish. One nodded at me, respectful. But most looked at me the way you look at a misplaced antique. Odd, a little sad. I didn't explain, didn't protest. I took off my blazer, rolled up my sleeves, and got to it. They want to see me break. Not today. By mid-morning, I felt every year I'd ever lived and every one I hadn't yet. But I kept my back straight. I lifted. I carried. I sweat. During break, a younger guy handed me a cold bottle of water. You don't belong here, viejo, he said gently. I took a sip and looked him square in the eye. I've belonged in worse places, I said, and stood straighter than most. The foreman strolled by later and called out, Hey, Ray's old guy, stack those on the left. No name, just an accessory to someone else's identity. I stacked, one box at a time, letting the weight remind me who I still was. A woman browsing chairs looked over and smiled. Are you volunteering, sir? I smiled back. Something like that. Lunch came. I didn't bring one. Ray showed up instead, honking from the parking lot like she was doing me a favor. You lasted longer than I thought, she said, smug. I told them you'd need the money. She handed me a brown paper sack. Inside, sandwich, apple, and a bottle of water. Untouched. Oh, she added as I climbed in. We're docking $150 from your share for last month. The electric bill spiked again. You leave that heater running too long. I nodded, said nothing. She kept talking. I hope this motivates you to be more helpful around the house. It's not a retirement home, you know. I looked out the window as she drove, ate the cold sandwich slowly. There's a way she uses logic like a scalpel. Clean cuts, no blood, just pieces of you missing when she's done. Back in the garage, the evening crawled in. I didn't go to dinner. Instead, I wrote a note and pinned it outside the door. If I'm so expensive to feed, I'll start cooking for myself. Please don't interrupt. Inside, I opened a can of beans, cooked them slow on the hot plate, a splash of pepper, a little salt. I ate in silence, spoon by spoon, like it was a ceremony. Then I opened the old laptop and pulled up the security footage again. My villa, still perfect, still quiet, still mine. Soon, I whispered. Before bed, I logged into a bank account Ray didn't know existed. I transferred money, modest, steady, to a local fund that supports caregivers for the elderly. They want to make me small, but I'll grow elsewhere. I woke up before the sun. The house was still. No footsteps overhead, no television murmuring behind a door, just the old hum of the fridge and the faint tick of the wall clock out in the hallway. My mouth was dry, so I pulled on my sweater and headed quietly toward the kitchen for a glass of water. As I neared the hall, I heard them, Brandon and Ray. Their voices, low and sharp, came from the kitchen just around the corner. I didn't mean to stop, but something in Ray's tone made my feet freeze. "You really think the old man will last another year?" Brandon asked. Ray's voice cool as glass. "Hopefully not. His pension won't transfer if he moves out, remember?" My heart didn't race. It stopped. Just stopped. I leaned lightly against the hallway wall, careful not to make a sound. The shadows held me like a cloak, but I wasn't hiding. I was listening, fully awake now, painfully so. Ray let out a dry laugh. All I did was get him a job and stop smiling. That's all it took. "He's folding already." Brandon muttered something too low for me to catch, and Ray continued, "Smart, right? I look like the nice one. If he snaps, he's unstable, and we're just the poor couple trying to help." Then they laughed, together. Brandon added, "Like that time he asked where the garden hose was, and you said, 'Ask the retirement home gardener.'" More laughter. They joked about my meals. "Depression food," she called it. Said it with a sneer, like feeding myself with dignity was something shameful. Then Ray's voice turned matter-of-fact. "I already talked to a lawyer. If he passes early, we'll need to handle probate quickly. I'm not letting his villa go to the state." I didn't blink, didn't breathe. Just let their words pour over me like freezing water. Each syllable peeled back a layer of memory, revealing something far uglier underneath. I stepped back, slow and silent, until I was back in the garage, closed the door, locked it. I didn't cry, didn't speak. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at myself in the mirror. There he was, a man they'd decided was expendable. "They're waiting for me to vanish," I said aloud. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like someone else's grief. Suddenly, everything sharpened. The skipped dinners, the clipped tones, the job. None of it was thoughtless. It was a plan, an erosion disguised as routine. I remembered my wife's funeral. Ray held my arm, comforting, until the cameras were gone. Then she vanished into the background like she didn't owe me anything. Maybe she never felt she did. I thought back. One winter, Brandon had accidentally erased all footage from my old home cameras. Said he was trying to fix the system. I'd believed him. Ray once talked me into selling my second car. "Simplify," she said. I let her handle the deposit. Never saw that money again. There was that family trip to the coast. Too expensive for me to join, they claimed. But somehow Brandon's parents got flown in, first class. I chalked it all up to insensitivity, youthful ignorance. I see now. I gave them too much credit. I opened my drawer and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook. Inside, copies of insurance policies, villa paperwork, account numbers I hadn't looked at in years. I laid it all out like a general before battle. I began writing, not journaling, mapping, planning. I transferred a small sum to an untouched account. Nothing obvious, just a pulse check to see if Ray was watching. Then I stared at the name written on a dusty business card tucked in the back of the notebook. Thomas H. Lewin-esque, retired, but sharp as a tack. An old friend I hadn't spoken to in 15 years. It was time. At breakfast, I walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. Ray looked up, coffee in hand. "You slept in? Everything okay?" I smiled. "Better than ever." I reached for the orange juice. "By the way," I said, "I'll be gone most of tomorrow. Hope that doesn't mess with your schedule." She blinked. Her lips parted just slightly, enough for me to know I'd struck something. And then I drank my juice. By the time I got home, the sun was dropping low behind the hills, casting a gold haze through the living room windows. My shoulders ached from lifting furniture all day, but my mind was wide awake. I stepped through the front door slowly, careful not to make a sound. I heard Ray in the living room, sliding something across the floor, maybe rearranging again. She liked to move things when no one was watching. I passed by the mantel and caught something out of place. The portrait of my wife, tilted just slightly. Not enough to call attention, just enough to nudge it out of respect. That picture hung dead center in our first home. Every nail I drove into the wall was leveled by her hand. She had an eye for symmetry. Said balance mattered. I set my bag down, reached up, and adjusted the frame gently. Just a small move. But in my heart, it felt like a full step forward. They shift my anchor, I thought. I shift back. Later, I shut myself inside the garage, locked the door, and pulled my old laptop from the drawer. I hadn't used it in months, years maybe, but the password came back like muscle memory. I opened the folder named Janet and scrolled through documents. Deed records, private purchase agreements, the villa I bought in her name 21 years ago, paid in full, untraceable by Ray or Brandon. It was never meant for them. I clicked into the live feed. The grounds were still pristine, not a weed in sight. Curtains drawn, untouched furniture. My old study looked like it was waiting for me to sit back down with a glass of scotch and a dog-eared book. I didn't feel pride. Not exactly. What I felt was like clarity. That place was mine. My past, my work, my legacy. And no matter what they tried to erase, it still stood, waiting. I opened my email and typed to Marcus. "Coffee this week, for old time's sake." I didn't add more. If he still had the mind I remembered, that was enough. Marcus and I built the first version of the company from a 2-car garage. Back then, we measured success in coffee-stained blueprints and missed meals. He once told me, "Truth competes best when hidden." At the time, I thought it was about patents. Now I see it's about survival. Just in case, I uploaded a few select files to his shared archive, quiet markers. If something happened to me, he'd know where to look. 2 days later, I sat across from Eli, my accountant of over 30 years. We met at a quiet cafe. I brought my notebook. He brought a manila envelope. Inside were originals, not copies, originals, stocks, property deeds, old estate plans written long before Ray ever came into the picture. All signed, notarized, airtight. "I've been meaning to update your digital access," Eli said, sliding a flash drive across the table. "Thought it was time you looked at everything again." He didn't ask why. I didn't explain. But I tapped the record button on my phone anyway, just in case I needed his confirmation later. When I got home, a young man in a delivery polo stood at the door with a thick envelope. "Eric Whitmore?" he asked. I nodded. He handed me the letter, asked for a signature, and left without a word. Inside was a notice from a law firm, Ray's last name in the header, requesting financial transparency and asset clarification on behalf of future estate planning. They were getting bold. Dinner that night was unusually quiet. Ray was cheerful, overly so. She raised a glass of wine. "To new beginnings." I lifted my water. To truth, however late it arrives. The words dropped like a hammer. Ray blinked. Jax looked up from his plate. Brandon coughed. No one said a word after that, but I caught it, the flicker in her eyes, that shift, like she knew. I knew. After dinner, I returned to the garage. Settle in, exhale. Opened the laptop again. Checked the Villa feed, and froze. The door was ajar. I hadn't seen that door open in years. I leaned forward and tapped into the live camera. The feed flickered, then cleared. Someone was walking through the halls. I spent the better part of that morning hunched over my laptop in the garage, the smell of old oil and dust thick in the air. I scrubbed through the security feed from the villa frame by frame. There she was, Ray, not just walking through the place but moving like she belonged. She paused at the hallway mirror, Janet's mirror, lifted her phone and snapped photos, slowly, one room at a time, no rush, no panic. Then she stopped at the closet in our old bedroom, reached in, touched the shawl my wife wore on chilly evenings. She held it for a second, not out of memory, not out of love, but like someone inspecting merchandise. I didn't flinch. I downloaded every second of the footage, saved it to 2 drives, and encrypted it with an old code phrase from my Navy days. Then I backed it up to the cloud, twice. You walk into my history, I muttered. I'll own your footprints. I didn't tell her. Not yet. That part was still coming. Around noon, we sat across from each other at the kitchen island. She complained about the gas bill, how someone keeps leaving lights on, and then mentioned casually that the warehouse could use extra hands. You don't mind being useful, right? I didn't say a word. I chewed slowly, set my fork down. Her eyes twitched. Just a flicker, but enough. I learned something in that moment. Silence doesn't just disarm, it disturbs. Later that afternoon, I started leaving the house earlier. Didn't say where I was going. Walked like I had purpose, because I did. That evening, Brandon glanced up from the couch and chuckled. Old man's got legs again. I looked him straight in the eye and said, I never lost them. You just stopped looking below the surface. He tried to smirk but came up empty. I walked to the dinner table, took my knife with me, and didn't come back for dessert. That night, I locked my bedroom door. For the first time since I'd moved in, the old brass lock clicked shut. As I stood there, I caught Ray's shadow in the hallway mirror. She paused, hesitated. Then she knocked once. Soft, calculated. You okay? She asked through the wood. You've been acting different. I didn't answer. Next morning at breakfast, she folded her arms. You know this house isn't a hotel. I took my time finishing my coffee, then said, no, hotels offer more privacy and respect. Her mouth opened, then closed. I walked away. Later, I asked her if she wanted to take a walk with me around the backyard. She hesitated, but curiosity won. We stood by the old fence, the one she never fixed, though she complained about it constantly. I looked out over the overgrown edge and said, you've been investing a lot of energy into controlling the narrative. She laughed. What narrative? The one where I disappear slowly while you stay clean. She narrowed her eyes. You're reading too much into things. No, I said. I've read just enough. She tried to brush it off, but I kept looking at her. I've been a lot of things in life. Passive was never one of them. You've just confused patience with surrender. She stepped back a little. Her face didn't know what emotion to land on. And Ray, I added, if you're going to manipulate the truth, make sure the silence isn't louder than your story. Then I turned and walked back to the house, leaving her there, alone, staring at the weeds she never bothered to pull. That evening, after dinner, I opened my desk drawer and started organizing. Birth certificates, deeds, trust agreements. One by one, moved into a new structure, fully shielded, tied back to the villa. I called the old gardener, told him to resume his visits. Keep it breathing, I said, just in case. I picked up a cheap prepaid phone from the gas station, hid it under a false bottom drawer in my closet. Each day I kept up the appearance, unfolding towels, sweeping the porch, washing a dish or two. But the truth was I wasn't folding. I was waiting and watching Ray become less certain with every calm gesture I made. That night, just as I sat down with a crossword and hot tea, the phone rang. Marcus. Eric, he said. Ray called me today. Said she was concerned about your health. Wanted to know if you've been declining. I didn't speak. Figured you'd want to know, he added. I thanked him. Hung up. Then turned to my reflection in the window glass and said low, let's see who gets sick first. When I got back home that afternoon, I went straight to the villa feed. I don't know why, instinct maybe, or habit, but something pulled me there. Sure enough, the frame of the camera in my private room was slightly shifted. A painting, Janet's favorite, the one with the old red barn, was tilted just enough to notice. The dust on the floor showed the faint outline of a shoe that didn't belong to me. I had placed that painting myself 10 years ago. Measured the nails, leveled it 3 times. It hadn't moved since, until now. Around 6, Ray threw together a little backyard gathering. Nothing formal, just some of her friends, a few neighbors, the type who drink wine but avoid hard conversations. From my seat inside, I watched them through the window, laughing, toasting. The view from the yard overlooked the hills, and if you stood just right, you could see the line of trees that marked the villa's property. I sat alone, a cold glass of water sweating in my hand. She knew what she was doing. You think exposure scares me? I said under my breath. I was built in the dark. Dinner came next. We all sat around the long table. Ray had overdone it. Roast chicken, sweet potatoes, 3 kinds of bread. She loved feeding people when there were eyes on her. As the plates were being passed, she raised her glass and said, just loud enough for the whole table to hear, Eric didn't even step inside the house today. Must be too tired to live. A chuckle or two, then silence. Jax looked down at his plate. One of the guests cleared their throat. Someone else reached for the butter. I didn't flinch. I walked more today than I did in my whole retirement, I said calmly. She tried to laugh it off. Well, maybe you're finally finding your second wind. I met her eyes. You choose insults over memory. That tells me all I need to know. I stood up slowly, my chair sliding back against the floor with a dull scrape. No drama, no yelling. Just the sound of a man deciding he was done shrinking to fit someone else's idea of small. After the guests left, I was heading down the hall when I noticed Milo sitting by the coat rack holding something, my old brown dress shoes. He looked up. Grandpa, do you still belong here? I knelt down, touched the worn leather between us. I always have, buddy. They just forgot to notice. I took his hand and led him out to the veranda. The night air was cooler now, crickets starting to hum. I pointed toward the hills. See that line of trees? He nodded. Behind that is a truth nobody talks about. Sometimes people try to bury the parts of you that shine too bright, but the light always finds its way back. He leaned in, whispering, I believe you. Around midnight, when the house was quiet, I went back to the live feed. The villa again. The locked door to the back room, the one no one even knew existed, was cracked open. I didn't wait. I pulled on my jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and drove out. The road was dark and familiar. I parked just before the gate and walked the last 100 feet. Inside, it smelled like cedar and old books. There were footprints in the dust along the corridor. I followed them. Halfway down, I heard it, faint steps behind me. I stopped breathing. I listened. Whoever it was, They were careful. Trained, maybe, or scared, or both. I whispered a prayer under my breath, steadied my grip on the flashlight, but then the noise vanished, like it had never been there. I walked out slowly, locked the door behind me, tighter this time. Back in the car, I texted Marcus. Meet me tomorrow. We have work to do. No context. He'd understand. When I got home, no one was awake. I climbed the stairs, sat down at my desk, and wrote one sentence on a blank sheet of paper. No more apologies. No more hiding. I stared at it for a long time. Outside, the world was still. Until it wasn't. At 2 a.m., I heard a car engine. Low, slow, rolling to a stop. I peeled back the curtain just an inch. A figure stepped out, too far to see the face, but close enough to know they weren't here by accident. A shadow moved across the driveway. I didn't blink. They've come to finish what they started, I whispered. I arrived at my study just as dusk pressed its shadows against the windows. Serena was already there, sorting through stacks of legal folders and manila envelopes. The overhead light cast long angles across the desk. She laid out original deeds, minutes of board meetings, inheritance records, papers that smelled of memory, authority, and weight. I watched her hands tremble slightly as she placed the documents before me. Each page felt like decades of work, erased and reclaimed. Among them were old letters from Janet praising my dedication, letters Ray had once brushed aside as sentimental nonsense. Serena warned me quietly. Ray would fight tooth and nail to preserve the version of history she liked. As she spoke, I hit record on my hidden voice memo app. This is unassailable proof, I said softly. My own voice sounded steadier than I felt. I thanked Serena, gratitude mixed with sorrow. This evidence was victory, but also burial. Later, I confronted Ray in the dining room. Voices hushed by the papers I held. I laid out the documentation, the down payment on the condo for Jax and Lorelei, originally paid by me, then quietly transferred to their names. Ray's eyes flicked over the pages, her face went pale. Jax shifted. She tried to protest, saying I held resentment. I looked at her levelly. This is not memory. This is truth. I left a copy of the deeds and bank statements on the dining table where guests could see. The hush settled like dust in the room. Outside, whispers began. Guests exchanged glances. Ray tried damage control. My father is old and confused. I said nothing. Milo, standing just in the doorway, called, "Grandpa?" Ray's face stung with surprise. In that moment, I saw what mattered most. In the family meeting, I revealed the villa, the maps, the live camera feed, the dates. I didn't gloat. I said, I kept it silent, but I never lost it. Ray's composure cracked. Jax's color drained. I spoke of trust clauses that locked the property to me permanently. You treated me like dust, I said. Now the foundation is in my hands. Audible gasps followed. I felt them crack. Ray stormed out. Jax watched her go. Milo stepped beside me. Come with me, I said. He nodded. I felt a shift inside, a cessation of waiting. Later, Serena whispered in my ear, 2 pages are missing from the original contract. My heart sank. Someone had altered history. As I stared at Ray's abandoned seat, I wondered who engineered the erasure first.